Greetings.
This meeting is being recorded.
Greetings and welcome to Star Center Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Hercules and the Space Gods, I am proud to announce Unariun Revelations. Today, the topic is Tesla and his importance in our positive future. And now, I hand the show over to the wonderful folks at the Unarius Academy of Science.
Welcome everybody to our talk this afternoon in San Diego. It would be obviously the evening on the East Coast. We're going to be talking about Tesla's vision for planet Earth and what that meant to our world from Unarius' perspective, Unarius Education Foundation's perspective. Unarius is a nonprofit school of learning, and in it we study the function of the mind, how the mind works. We study energy, how energy works, how we are energy beings, how we are not only made up of all the experiences we've been through in this lifetime, but in many, many lifetimes. And those different experiences give us the different problems that we have, the inhibitions, the insecurities. And it also gives us the tremendous positive, constructive things that are a part of our lives, whether it's music or, art or poetry or acting or whatever it may be that you can do in a constructive way. Those were not just some things that were handed out by some god in some far off cloud somewhere. They are development that you have gone through an evolutionary period of time where you've worked to earn that ability. And now in this particular lifetime, it just seemingly comes easy for you. Or in many other cases, we can see where these advanced souls have come to our planet and have brought this knowledge. And I always ask, well, why them and not me? Well, there's a very logical reason for it. When you understand that we have each lived many, many lifetimes, if those souls, that particular soul, in this case, we're talking about Tesla, had gone through that evolutionary period of time, developing his, what we call the superconscious self, or building in a positive, constructive way, his knowledge of the universe and his knowledge of the mind, his knowledge of how the universe functions. When he incarnated in his lifetime, this time around, over 100 years ago, it was second nature for him to actually bring through these incredible understandings and tools and inventions for us to utilize on our world. So Unarius gives the understanding of why that happens, how we can go from just being on a kind of a treadmill type existence, going from work to play to sleep to work to drink, whatever it may be, and start to realize, no, we want to develop ourselves towards a very positive, constructive future. So we're going to be talking again about Tesla. And more importantly, we're going to be talking about that superconscious self that is the real higher self, that is the true self of Tesla. And that is the Archangel Michael. On the inner worlds, that is what he is known by as the Archangel Michael.
Can we have the first slide?
Oh, we're going to go ahead and have slides, by the way.
So there's a desperate need to find out how we're going to provide fuel for our future. Right now, unfortunately, gas, coal, and oil are being used kind of like a weapon, easily to manipulate people and to take advantage of them not having enough. So you see, there's certain countries that are holding back fuel. So Nikola Tesla, like Kevin said, had a developed superconscious as he was bringing in new thought ideas, new ideas about our future physics. And he was a Unarian brother, a brother of the light. He had a developed superconsciousness. And if you read Unarius, Dr. Norman especially wrote about our future science and how it's going to be used in a positive way in our positive Aquarian age. So I don't know how to say this, but Nikola Tesla matched what Ernest Norman was trying to introduce. So next slide. So Nikola Tesla was a being, an energy being, a spiritual being from the higher spiritual planes. And he had a developed superconsciousness, like Kevin said. He developed it over many, many lifetimes. So, so did Einstein. So this is not a gift from God that is handed out to people who are lucky, but this is something we learn as Unarians, as past life students, to take the negative energy of our past lives and convert it into positive energy in our future. So one of the things that Nikola Tesla discovered, that his mind was a receiver. Next slide. And he wrote about what's so important to understand about how our universe works is to understand energy, frequency, and vibration. And then once you understand those terms, you understand how the universe works. Now, this is brilliantly described in Unarius. Dr. Norman brilliantly goes over these ideas about how the universe works.
So with his understanding of the world of the universe as this energy, frequency, and vibratory oscillating mechanism, he started to bring through these technologies and these understandings of machinery that could make our world a paradise. And unfortunately, the people at that time period when he was incarnated didn't really understand what he was doing. When you think of it in terms of when he was developing his technology, the buggies were being used, horse and buggy was still being used. Airplanes were, fairly new. We were just developing the locomotive, all these different things that were being done. And here comes this individual who says, you know what? I can power the whole world. I can power the whole world and supply it with unlimited amounts of energy for free once we get my system functioning. Well, it was so far beyond what people could conceive in their minds because, you think about it, here's a man doing things that seemed almost like magic because he was taking his understanding of energy and he was actually applying it, energy and electricity, and actually applying it and bringing forth these incredible new products, new tools, new machines. And as David pointed out, that he was this being from this higher world. That's what the slide was about, dweller on two planets, because really this physical body, as he termed it, was a receiver. His real self was in these higher dimensions. And he would, if you listen to him and go back and read about him, talk about how he was just receiving this information and putting it into manifestation on planet Earth. And he would also talk about how he could see it in his mind before it was made and built, and would, see it in his consciousness, build it, refine it in his mind, could come back to it months later and see where the parts have worn out, and then say, okay, well, here's where we need to make adjustments to this new machine that I'm bringing into manifestation, this new way of developing energy or electricity for our world. So, it's just incredible the things that he was doing at that point in time. And unfortunately, like we said, the Earth planet just couldn't grasp what he was doing. One of the things I like to talk about is that when he was building his power station, he built the first one in a place in Colorado. Colorado Springs. And that's where one of his main, that's actually where he worked out so many of his theories and actually developed some of the technologies that he later wanted to take to a place called Wardenclyffe in New Jersey and really develop that power tower for the whole world to have this energy. Well, when he was doing this, there was a physicist by the name of, it was a physicist in London.
Lord Kelvin.
Yeah, Lord Kelvin, thank you. And he said, it's wonderful that you're going to develop this new power system for our world. But until you get that developed, what we really should be doing is looking into developing solar energy, wind energy, and any other form of ways of generating electricity and power that will not pollute our world. So when you think of it in those terms, this is over 100 years ago. It's taken humanity 100 years to get to the point where they start to realize, you know what, we can utilize this thing from the sun, the sunlight, and we can generate power that way, and it's not going to hurt our world. But it's taken humanity this whole 100 years to get to the point where they can begin just to see it makes more sense to do things that are not harming our environment, that are not harming our planet, that are not harming this orb that we all live on, to generate power. So it's very slow moving, but this is what he had in mind as his vision for the future. Tesla did, of generating this power, using that power source to not only give the whole world power, but use that power source to be able to send messages all around the globe. People couldn't conceive of that. Have radio that worked, a working radio transmitter that worked throughout the globe, that would be able to send, as he termed it, a facsimile of a piece of paper from one point to another, and be able to print it out at that other end, and then be able to utilize that as a way of transmitting messages, to be able to transmit checks, to be able to have a universal clock. I mean, all these things that were going through his consciousness, they were so far in advance of humanity, humanity could not grasp what he was attempting to do.
So he wrote, electric power is everywhere, present in unlimited quantities, and can drive the world's machinery without the need of coal, gas, and oil. So oil is a big polluter, and fortunately, there's a lot of older souls who are incarnated now who are trying to move us away from dependence on coal. Next slide. So the universe is made of frequencies. And this is important to understand how we're going to accomplish the things that we want to have: an unlimited, pollution-free power source that Nikola Tesla described that we could have. Now, next slide. To understand the true nature of an atom is where we're going to start. So the atom is a frequency converter. It's converting frequencies in a higher dimension and bringing them down through a vortexual movement or vortexes into the third dimension. And we call that an atom. So the atom has no solid particles, like most scientists think. It's composed of tiny vortexes of wave energies. So think about an atom as really not solid particles, protons, neutrons, electrons, that you could just knock around and derive energy from it. That's not the proper way to do it. So next slide. So every atom broadcasts out a force field. When an atom has its own force field, like a hydrogen atom, the simple one, they understand that as layers or shells of an atom. But when two atoms combine, they make a molecule. That's a force field that is combining together. It's not the way the chemistry scientist thinks. The chemist thinks it's not these particles that are interacting. The bonding force is this force field, and the flux densities, the electromagnetic lines of force that are either going to be compatible with each other through frequency relationship, or they're going to repel each other, or they're going to be remaining quiescent. They're not going to mix like water and oil. So next slide. So Nikola Tesla, well, the Atlanteans, let's say, they knew all about frequency, and the true nature of the atom is really an energy converter, a frequency converter. They knew all about that. So Atlantis utilized one power tower that provided clean, pollution-less energy to the whole continent of Atlantis. And we have beautiful articles in Unariun about how Atlantis was powered. Now, one thing is that Atlantis enjoyed beautiful sculptured gardens that people could meditate in, walk around, enjoy nature. And they kept the atmosphere of Atlantis charged with this energy, electrical energy, that made everything grow and kept the air pure.
So one of the things that we talk about is, and what Nikola Tesla understood is that each and every one of us is simply a drop of energy in this vast sea of cosmic energy. And if we could learn how to tap that at the right frequency, we're going to be able to drive back out from that the energy, as David talked about, the electricity, the power that we need. We don't need to do it in the way that we're doing it today, where you have all these pollution byproducts of the way we're generating power, whether it's coal, you have all that stuff going into the atmosphere, cars using gas, same thing. The nuclear fission or fusion, when they use that to derive power, the nuclear power plants, you're left over with this, residue that is radioactive for, I don't know, what does it have, a half-life of 100,000 years or something ridiculous. And it's poisonous. They don't know what to do. It's like try and find places in the desert in the United States. Let's just ship it off to Nevada. Nobody will know what's buried in the desert out there. So, I mean, it's just an example of how inane we are as a humanity to use these power sources. They're killing us. And this is something that Tesla saw, I mean, as early as 1900, late 1800s. He looked at the ways that coal was being used to generate power and said, well, that's not only is it incredibly short-sighted because it's polluting our world, but it's not very efficient. And then he also looked at, the other ways that we were generating power and said, okay, and which is what he did. He was the one that tamed Niagara Falls and took that tremendous power that was being generated by the water going over that fall to turn the generators to put the electricity forth to power Buffalo and New York. But up until that time, nobody had done anything like that. Edison was trying to use direct power. He was the one that came along and said, no, we're going to use alternating current. But he even knew that it was incredibly inefficient because you're having to string wires from the power source all the way to the city, step it up so you could just pump it and get it to go all the way to the city and then have transformer to bring it down to a frequency, a charge, a voltmeter of voltage that we could actually utilize in our homes or in our businesses or whatever. And he said, well, that's incredibly inefficient. What we should be doing is, and again, this is where this idea that so much of what he did was magical, people couldn't conceive in their minds what he was trying to accomplish. And it's still true today, that, we don't have to use wires. We can actually use the whole planet as a standing wave and be able to tap into that anywhere upon our planet and derive the amount of energy that we need. All you need is, because if you step up the frequency and utilize the whole world as this reservoir of energy, you just need an antenna of a certain kind to be able to bring it down into a frequency that you can utilize for your home or your car or your boat or your airplane. And if you look at next slide, please.
Oh, can you go back one real quick? Sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that the force that's coming, that the atom is distributing, is the life force of the universe. There's a life force coming through all the atoms from the infinite mind itself. And it goes through the isotopes. So the isotopes step it down in frequency like a step down transformer. So the isotopes are the spiritual component, or the other part of the atom that is not really understood. The spiritual component of the atoms are the isotopes. So when we use isotopes like uranium and plutonium to make bombs or fission power plants, we're disrupting that life force. We're distorting it. So that distortion comes into our world. And now we have to deal with the pollution. The spent fuel rods, we have to find out now what are we going to do with them? They're poisonous. And so this is not the proper way to do it. The proper way to understand how the universe works is to understand each atom is transferring this spiritual life force into it. And so you're not going to derive a positive source of energy by ripping it apart. Does that make sense? You can't destroy it.
Yeah, if it worked that way, we wouldn't be left with this pollution residue from the process. And that's what Tesla recognized as well. If we're working in harmony with the cosmos, we're not going to get this leftover residue that is harmful to humanity. So next slide, please. And then actually okay, there we go. Thank you. So we're going to talk, because David talked about transformers. And I know many people don't know what a transformer is, or how it functions, or what it does. We've all seen them. You walk down the street and you see your wires going from one pole to the other, and every so often you'll see these big, canister-looking things on the side of the pole, and that's a transformer. And what that transformer is doing is it's stepping down a high voltage to a voltage that can be utilized, like we said, for your business or your home. In this particular picture, this is Tesla sitting in his laboratory in Colorado Springs. And you'll see a humongously giant Tesla coil in action, and it is actually a transformer. How is it a transformer? Well, it's taking one particular state of frequency of energy, and it's stepping it up and transmitting it to another one where it's going to be stepped down. And we're going to actually show you how that functions here in a little while. So he recognized that as opposed to the way things are done today, where they don't really utilize this high frequency electronics to utilize for power for generating electricity for our world, that was the way to really go about doing it, so that we get away from this idea of using power lines or wires to transmit electricity. And before we get too much further, usually the question comes up, yeah, but isn't that electromagnetic field that's being generated by a power tower, isn't that source going to be harmful to humans? Well, yeah, if you do it wrong, it will be. But what we're talking about is stepping up to such a frequency and utilizing that higher ratio of energy function, so that it is not harmful to human nature, isn't harmful to human beings. And as David was saying, when it's utilized properly, it will actually cleanse the atmosphere and can be used to not only keep from generating more pollution on our world, but can actually also cancel out the effects of the pollution that's already existent. You can introduce a wave that is 180 degrees opposite of the particular frequency of that pollution, whatever it is. It's smog or polluted water, or because our water source is being polluted as well. And you can utilize that high frequency physics to clean up that particular problem and generate something of a much more positive nature. You can utilize that high frequency physics to cancel out viruses.
We're going to get to that.
We're getting to that next. Okay, next slide. So this is a poster I love showing, because this was actually drawn at the behest of Tesla himself, who wanted to tell people, and this was put out in a pamphlet that he made, what would happen once his power tower was made and completed in Wardenclyffe. That from that one power source, you'd be able to power your airplanes, your blimps, your cars, your boats, everything, your lights, your whatever you wanted to do. It would only have to utilize that one power source. And in this pamphlet, and I didn't copy it, I probably should have. It's just fascinating, because he was saying things that we understand today that people didn't get then. Again, you'd be able to have a handheld device to talk to somebody around the other side of the planet. You'd be able to, it's just fascinating.
Let me add, Kevin, that this was a psychic representation Nikola Tesla was inspired to create from his higher self, which existed in Atlantis. Atlantis beamed energy out in beams of coherent energy like a laser. And like we were talking about, all you need is a split ball antenna just to step that energy down to household current. And this is the way Atlantis powered itself, with this Tesla power tower. And Tesla was inspired by his higher self to come up to recreate the science of Atlantis.
Now, we will say that Tesla, these visions he had for our future were fantastic. But we at Unarius we're taking it even further and saying, well, it's great that you want to have a power source to provide the whole world with this free energy. But rather than even utilizing, a Niagara Falls generating power plant to get that tower going, what you should be doing is, as David was talking about earlier, when you have an understanding of how energy functions, how the atom functions, how it's receiving this impulse of power from its inner contact with that higher frequency world. Well, once you begin to understand how that functions, now you can utilize that to set up for your, on the exterior sides of your power tower, well, it was visualized as a pyramid that would tap into that those higher frequency fields, those higher frequency electromagnetic fields that we don't yet understand, and be able to take that information, that energy information, and step it down, and then utilize it once again through that power tower source to project out to the whole planet that electrical charge.
That's the last slide, by
Whoops,
the way.
sorry, I went ahead. Next slide.
Next slide. You want to talk about Rife?
You go ahead and talk about it.
Well, there's this fellow named Rife who was a student of Nikola Tesla and was inspired to come up with frequencies that helped heal the body. And he proposed that once you isolated the specific frequency of a bacteria or a virus or whatever the disease you were suffering from, the Rife generator would send a signal to your body, and it would cancel it out or negate or neutralize that disease you were suffering from. Now, this is a positive step in the right direction. Now, think about water and how we're allowing microplastics to pollute our oceans all the way up into the Arctic Ocean. And that's going to be eventually harmful to drink. We've got to find a way to purify the water because, there are rivers and lakes that are drying up and our climate is changing. So Rife was pioneering new steps, positive steps for the future to understand how we could use specific frequencies in our body and to combat contaminants, bacteria, etc.
And disease. And before we go to the next slide, very important to talk about, I believe it's in Sweden. Before you say this, oh, this is just some crazy talk. I want to say it's in Sweden, I believe, where they're actually utilizing frequencies to start to counteract the effects of cancer on the body. So again, you have these pioneers that have come to our world and brought this understanding that we are energy beings and utilizing that awareness in a way that we haven't caught up to yet. So that's going to be in our future as well, is that instead of cutting up bodies to get rid of disease, cancers, get over whatever, get over COVID, whatever it is, we're going to be able to set an oscillator up the right frequency, have a person, whether they step into the booth or however it's going to be made, they will be radiated with that frequency at that specific attunement that will be needed to cancel out that disease or that cancer or that whatever it is. So our future, we're talking about things that not only technology wise are going to make our world so much better, but spiritually wise, we're going to be maturing with this awareness of ourselves as energy beings, not looking to some God somewhere to save us, but realizing, what, we got ourselves into this mess. We can get ourselves out of it if we're willing to listen to and be open to that inspiration from those higher intelligent beings. Next slide, please.
So Nikola Tesla, as Kevin mentioned, discovered that planet Earth has a resonant frequency. And he determined it, and he wrote articles about, hey, if I could just find the resonant frequency and I can create an oscillator that taps into that resonant frequency and stimulates it, then I can extract any point on the Earth energy. So this is a step that is needed for our planet Earth. And now we can go much further than that, but at least this is a step that Nikola Tesla was proposing. But just like Rife, he had a lot of opposition from souls who were not that open spiritually, and they resisted. In fact, they opposed a lot of what Rife was doing, and unfortunately, being a cosmic visionary means sometimes you go out there in the briar patch and get all scratched up because that's your mission, is to provide new ideas, a new pathway for mankind to go down. Again, Nikola Tesla was identifying a road we could go down that was frequencies and vibrations and energy. And once you learn to tap into it like a radio, that energy can be redirected to help our world grow.
Next slide, please.
Now, this is technology not in harmony.
Yes. So I keep going with the slides, please. So the obviously we've all heard of the Fukushima power plant, what happened there, and this is something we brought up earlier. You know, the way they're deriving power using nuclear power plants is just crazy, because again, you end up with these spent fuel rods that, you know, have this incredibly long life, where they are radioactive and harmful to humanity, and they didn't know what to do with them, so they stored them. And of course, then you have this tsunami happen, and you know, all of a sudden now we've got all this pollution going out into the ocean. Next slide, please. And this is I think one of the visuals many of us have seen that's on the internet, where, I mean, it just didn't stop. You know, well, it looks like, oh, it went away because, you know, you can't see anything. Well, no, it went into our ocean. It's now part of our whole ecological system. They now have traces of that radioactive material on the west coast of the United States and California, and further down south into South America, of that radioactive material that got released into our oceans. So again, this is an example of how unintelligent humanity has been in its obsession to generate power and to make money generating power through the use of being able to sell that energy, that electricity, that power to other peoples. And again, is counteractive to what Tesla saw, because Tesla knew so much of the strife in our planet was because of all of us needing power, needing electricity, needing these new technologies to move our world, our countries, our cities forward. And he wanted to do it in a way that would that was available for all. And if you read his life story, you'll see over and over again, he could have died, you know, billionaire many times over, if he just stuck with collecting royalties to all the inventions that he had made. But unfortunately, or fortunately, his mind was so up above that, he didn't want to have to be bothered with that, because he was so busy trying to invent ways and develop these different ways for our planet, our whole world, to move forward. Next slide, please.
So once again, Fukushima is an example of not understanding what isotopes are. They're the spiritual component of physical atoms, and they're not to be destroyed or ripped apart or blown apart. They're to be utilized properly and tuned into. And the energy that they provide can be extracted from them. And if we understood the true nature of the atom, we wouldn't have Fukushima or Chernobyl, because we would not be blowing apart isotopes. So there's a great need to understand how we could have ultra high frequency electronics to make our world a cleaner world. For example, the introduction of high frequency electronics used to clean the pollutants, or used to convert seawater into fresh drinking water, can be used by utilizing and understanding ultra high frequency electronics. Again, Nikola Tesla documented a lot of these things, but he knew that the present technicians and scientists weren't ready for his ideas. He told people, look, a lot of what I have to tell people about is for the future. The future scientists and technicians will understand how to unlock this.
And I might say that what David was saying is, if you do study his life, in the latter part of his life, he was many scientists wrote him saying, hey, you need to write some of these things down for the future, because you have so much in your head that you haven't shared with us, that you haven't written down, and it's going to all be lost. And he refused to do it because he was very aware that, you know, technology without the spiritual component with it would lead to humanity blowing itself up.
He wrote a lot of it.
He wrote a lot of it, not all of it though, because there's a lot of
True
studies that are writings about the fact they didn't include so much of how to change and utilize that.
I think he knew that spiritually we weren't ready for all of this, and we would just make new weapons out of it. And so this is a thing that we don't want to happen.
Next slide, please.
Now, sewage can be dealt with the same way I just mentioned. If you understand how ultra high frequency electricity can be utilized to purify sewage and rid our planet of all the contaminants and sewage that are in our waterways, we could have plenty of clean drinking water.
Next slide, please.
Now, we mentioned Chernobyl. We mentioned Fukushima. But in addition to what Kevin was saying about the pollutants in the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, airborne pollution and particulates were discovered, and they're now pervasive all over the globe. And this is a problem. We are permitting Gaia, or planet Earth, to be poisoned slowly by the improper use of isotopes and fission and atomic energy. So we have two books, especially Tesla Speaks Volume 1 and 2, that go into if we could learn the true nature and frequency of these isotopes, we could build cosmic generators to help us tune into the atom's true nature, the isotopes, and we could have many different things in our future that are basically utopia-like. And this is part of our future. And Kevin and I we're doing our part by planting seeds and carrying forth the mission of these higher spiritual brothers who want planet Earth to have a clean drinking, clean energy, and to thrive as a healthy planet.
Next slide, please. So this is a slide that is not, there's nothing made up about this. This is not Photoshopped. The right side is not Hong Kong, but Beijing on a day when they do not have smog. Left side is an actual photo from the same exact spot on a common day with all the smog that is generated by automobiles. So obviously, again, the way that they are generating power for those cars utilizing gas is the wrong way of doing it. And, just look at what happens. You would say, well, common sense would tell us this is a wrong way to generate power. But it takes humanity a long time to wake up to that. And it actually is incredibly, as we know, bad for us as human beings to breathe this smog. And it's just as bad for the plants, just as bad for the animals, just as bad for the whole world. So what you can do is, utilizing, as Dave was saying, this high frequency physics, you can actually put a waveform that is generated from that tower that would be out of phase with the smog, that would clean up the atmosphere, and actually the smog would actually almost like drop to the ground and you could sweep it up. Now, one of the things that Tesla did in his laboratories is he used to throw these big parties for people when he had something to share, and people would come to his laboratory and he would give these demonstrations on what he was developing. And one of the people that would visit him that he loved, and as a matter of fact, gave him or told him that it was because of him that he was still alive. And that individual was a fellow by the name of Mark Twain. Mark Twain and Tesla were very good friends. And when I say that, it is not a lie. Tesla, when he was suffering from this really intense disease, and I forget which one it was, but was ready to go over, he read Huckleberry Finn, and it so enthralled him with this adventure that this soul was having that he said it spurred him on to live. They became friends later on in life, but Twain would show up at his laboratories with these big old stogies and generating that crummy cigar smoke that Tesla hated. And Tesla utilized his high frequency coils that he had everywhere in his laboratory to cancel out the smoke from Twain's cigar. And we can demonstrate that in a little while too, to show you how it actually works. So this is going to be in our future as well, when we generate and understand how to utilize this high frequency physics with this power tower, and actually Tesla coils they don't have to be the big power tower. They can be smaller ones to cancel out the smog that is currently just polluting our world, causing all kinds of health issues and problems and what have you. We can clean that up. And right now, Actually, right now, I'm saying right now, it's a couple of years ago I read where the Chinese government was trying to utilize Tesla coils and running experiments to see if they could actually do that. So it's not, some fantasy island or something like that, some, fantasy fiction writings. People are actually beginning to say, okay, let's develop this. It's there. Let's develop and actually utilize it. Next slide, please.
So you can take the Tesla coil as it exists right now, without all these sparks, and you can use it on top of high buildings and mountains. And you can send out, as Kevin said, a signal that's 180 degrees out of phase with the smog or the particulates or the pollution, and all that can be canceled out and just drop down to the earth and collected as dust and dirt. And Tesla proved it in his Manhattan laboratory over and over and over again. And we can do this same thing.
Next slide, please.
And once you have these Tesla coils, you can make a matrix of the coils, and you could permeate the crust of planet Earth, the surface, the soil, with a certain frequency that would repel tornadoes. As soon as a tornado would come, this matrix would activate and pump energy into the soil and the ground, and it would create an out of phase repelling force for the tornado, and the tornado would go right over without touching down and destroying homes and buildings. And our last slide.
So we talked about Tesla and the power tower, but again, what we are going to be seeing in our future goes beyond what Tesla even envisioned for our world, because our planet has a very positive future ahead of it, and we're going to utilize this understanding of ourselves as energy beings, of the universe, of the cosmos as this vast energy field, and we're going to develop a power tower that will not only provide power for our world, it'll clean up the environment, help us clean up our water, our air, or whatever, but we will also utilize that power tower to make communications, direct communications with other physical planets that already have and are utilizing these power towers. You see, they utilize this understanding of high frequency physics on these other worlds, and it's only planet Earth, because we're very, very backward, that is yet to step up and acknowledge that we're not alone in the universe, and then be open to a better way. So they utilize their power towers on their worlds, not only to generate the power for their world and clean up their planet, but they also utilize it to make communications or have communications with other planets, and also utilize that to send or give the capabilities for flying saucers, or UFOs as they're called on our world, the capabilities to go from one planet to another, to give them the proper vector coordinates to go from one galaxy to another, from one planet within a galaxy to another. So we have a very positive future ahead of us.
So in this graphic, we take what Nikola Tesla tried to introduce to the world, and he built a small power tower in Long Island. It was 193 feet high, but this was just the beginning. Nikola Tesla was saying, look, this is just the beginning of what we could develop. So in the future, we'll have a power tower that we can build on planet Earth, especially where these intersections of electromagnetic lines or resonance lines of force crisscross. And there is a concentration there that exists. So we could put the power tower on one of those. And there's one of them here in San Diego County. And then the tower will stand about 2,000 feet high and go into the ground to tap the energies, the subterranean energies, about 1,000 feet. And then there will be a high frequency cosmic oscillation between the two. And then that energy can be beamed out in beams of energy and go right through the earth. And they will be harmless to people. They will be coherent energy, unlike 5G and everything everybody's afraid of now. And since planet Earth will not be an obstruction to that beam of energy, the beam of energy can go right through the earth and go to London, Beijing, Australia, and other places in the world, and they have step-down transformers that'll just provide energy. I mean, if you can imagine what Nikola Tesla was looking in the future and seeing is that we were using coal and petroleum and oil as weapons. I mean, people shouldn't be made to be subservient to the control over these petroleum and gas and oil and coal. I mean, heat needs to be distributed for people to use. So this is part of us learning to wake up as a spiritual person. That's who we are. We live many lifetimes, but our true nature is not physical. It's spiritual and it's interdimensional. And everyone has a higher self and everyone has that life force within them. They just need to learn how to tap into it. Become an artist, become a musician, become an inventor. This is something that can be done.
So I guess we are over with the slideshow. Is that the last slide?
So should we turn this on now?
Yeah, let's turn this on and give them some good examples here. All right. So what we're going to demonstrate right now is a Tesla coil. And this is nothing special about this. This was one that was bought off the, I believe it was found on the,
Internet.
On the internet, yeah, and purchased. And so we have a Tesla coil here that is receiving, we got it plugged into the wall. And what you see right here at the bottom here, this is called the primary. And you'll notice that it's got thicker wire and windings down here. And this is called the secondary here. It has thinner windings, many more windings. But these two are in resonance with one another. And this particular one, the secondary, which I always love talking about, there's no wire that goes from this one to this one. It actually inducts that electrical charge and steps it up because it is in resonance. These wires here, this coil right here is in resonance, proper resonance with this coil. It is actually taking that charge from the primary and then stepping up in frequency, and you'll see it come out as lightning bolts at the top.
So it's taking 60 cycles per second and stepping it up to RF range, which is about 500,000 cycles per second. That's your typical RF frequency. The voltage comes up with it because as scientists know, when you increase the frequency, the power goes up with it. So it's about 150,000 volts coming out of the top of the coil.
Okay, here we go. You ready?
So I don't feel any pain at all. And Nikola Tesla demonstrated this over and over again to people who were afraid of high frequency alternating current in his laboratories to try to refute the people who were trying to ruin his reputation. Yeah,
and there was a great story when he was doing these demonstrations of Tesla, because Edison was, as David said, trying to destroy Tesla, trying to destroy his way of generating power or electricity for our world, where he had two wires or two conduits on either side and a wire between them, and turned on his coils, his power, and the wire melted. But then
1,000,000 volts.
1,000,000 volts. But then Tesla, because he understood how it actually functioned, walked up to it, put his hand on one, put his hand on the other, and said, okay, now kick it on. And they turned it on. It did absolutely nothing to him whatsoever because the frequency is so high, it was not harmful to his human body.
And he had other people do it too.
Yes, exactly. So what we're going to show right now is this transmission of power or electricity without the use of wires.
You think we should?
Yeah, let's kick
lights?
it. Okay, I'll turn these off here. That's probably enough, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
So this is demonstrating a force field. So once again, every atom is generating a force field, and that's the thing that we need to tune into, like Rife introduced. We need to find frequencies of the force field and extract that energy through the resonance, and we can do all kinds of wonderful things.
Now, you guys can't smell what's going on here out in internet land on Zoom, But if you were here, what you would smell is this generated ozone by the coil itself. And this goes to right what we were describing that happened at the time of Atlantis that we should be utilizing on our world right now, where it is generating these cleansing frequencies into the atmosphere, canceling out all the crud and whatever that's currently in the atmosphere, even though we don't see it necessarily, and turning it into this wonderful smelling air, pure air. And actually it smells like a thunderstorm. Right after a thunderstorm or electrical storm happens, you know how the air just seems pristine and clean and the whole world seems to be cleansed. That's because of those high frequencies that are being generated by the electrical power storm help clean up the atmosphere. Well, we can do that ourselves. You don't have to wait for those storms to happen.
So let's see if we could demonstrate in this small tabletop method, wireless transmission of energy. Let's see if we can try it.
Okay, you ready? Here we go. So here's a power tower that's plugged into the wall, or a Tesla coil that's plugged into the wall. There's a coil that is not plugged into the wall at all, has no external things that it can derive power from.
Two bulbs, I think, are too much. Let's try to undo one of them.
Okay.
See if we can get one to work.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so what we have is a secondary. So we have a primary and a secondary here, and we generate all this charge. You see it, coming off of the top of this coil. And on this one over here, you have
the antenna.
Yep.
The antenna, this ball is collecting the energy, and it's the reverse construction of that coil. This is the step-down transformer. This is now the primary, and this is now the secondary. It's reversing this energy flow. It's now lighting up this little 14-volt bulb here. Sorry, it's not brighter, but
one of the things that happens is they have to be in total resonance with one another. And so the fellow that made this coil over here didn't know, how many windings were on this one.
Yeah, he didn't have this one to go by.
So he did as best by his memory as he could. And we have to, we make it work for our demonstration. But if they were completely in resonance with one another, we'd kick this one on and it would light those bulbs up immediately, very brightly.
Go to the YouTube. You'll find plenty of demonstrations like this on YouTube.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
I think we're ready for questions.
Okay.
Unless we put everybody to sleep. Hercules is muted. You're muted, Hercules.
Hi, I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
If anyone puts up the hand up or actually holds their hand up, because I don't know how to do the little icon, I'll gladly unmute you or ask you to unmute yourself if you have questions.
Hey, we have a question.
Hi, Griffin.
Hey, how are y'all doing today?
Good.
We were just wondering if we could get a quick clarification. When you say Atlantis, do you mean like the lost city of Atlantis, or do you mean like
The lost continent of Atlantis? Yes, that we're such a civilization. So we've talked a lot about these different machines up here. Essentially these are toys. There's some things that happen that when it's put into actual function, actual use, won't be as it is demonstrated here. For instance, the long lightning bolts. Well, that's they're coming off of the top of this coil. That's for effect. You don't have to do that. It's using what's called a spark gap to generate. To help generate that electricity, and one of the side effects is that those electrical bolts coming off of it, that does not need to happen whatsoever, but it does look really good in person and it's kind of fun to show. So that does not have to happen. But one of the things that I love in giving this demonstration is, as I talked about, is there's no wire connecting this coil to this coil down here. and they're in resonance with one another. So it transfers that power from one coil to the other. So we can talk about that we as souls and the atom itself, we talked about that earlier, the atom doesn't have the power within it. That's something that scientists have been going around with forever, you know, and they said, well, where's the life force? Where's it coming from? And he said, well, you know, people, I mean, primitive persons said, well, it's coming from God. You know, God has this electrical power charge. It just turns on and off. Well, what we understand as Unarian students is no, it's not. There's science behind all of this. There's science behind understanding we are energy beings, that we have this psychic anatomy, as we call it. And it's from that psychic anatomy that is connected up to that infinite creative intelligence that steps down through frequency relationship and through resonance, what we are as a human being. So again, we have as a human being this tremendous reservoir of understanding and knowledge, some of it positive, some of it's destructive, that is stored within that energy body. And that information then is making up who we are today. And there's that connection, that resonant connection between us and our psychic anatomy, our psychic body. We don't walk around with a little wire coming out of us going up to our psychic body. No, we have this resonance that's happening between our psychic anatomy and our physical body. And through that psychic anatomy, the energy body that we stored all this information, it is sending pulses of intelligence into this physical body that manifests as our world, as our life. So if we have, as we talked about, if you have a disease, a cancer, if you're short, if you're tall, if you have hair, you don't have hair, all these things are make-up experiences, are energy configurations that have been generated and stored within that psychic anatomy, that energy body. And now, you know, we are out picturing and showing to the world what we have done, what we have built, what we have earned through our evolutionary process.
Let me add, Kevin, that scientists are busily working on fusion generators. Now, they think the sun is hot due to hydrogen fusion. This is not correct. Just like the atom, the sun is an energy frequency converter. It's taking energy from the fourth dimension, the fifth, the sixth, the dimensions higher above the sun. The sun is stepping down that energy so that it can be distributed to all the planets. Each planet gets exactly the heat and light and gravity that it needs. So when scientists are trying to make fusion generators, they have to generate billions of degrees and contain it in something called a force field, a magnetic field. And this is not perfected yet. I don't believe this is the true pathway to go down. In fact, that's a complete misunderstanding of how the sun works. The sun does not work via thermonuclear reactions or explosions. That's not the way the sun works. I know everybody is fooled into thinking that, but they have a misunderstanding of how the sun is fusing hydrogen, et cetera, to make energy. And it's another misunderstanding that is brilliantly cleared up by Ernest Norman and Unarius. This is the Unarius Academy of Science that explains all these mysteries.
So as I was talking about earlier, so, you know, you have a developed soul like a Tesla. He, again, built that energy body, that psychic anatomy with these positive constructive lives. So it was very natural for him to express in the way he did, just as Mozart was writing, you know, symphonies at 4. And you say, well, why can't I do that? Well, we had not developed or earned that understanding through our evolutionary process yet. And I say yet because that's the wonderful understanding that Unarius brings to humanity is we are not finished product. We're a work in process. So if we want to become a musician, if we want to become an artist, if we want to become a scientist, we may not wake up tomorrow and be a Mozart or an Einstein or a Tesla, but certainly we can begin to make those steps forward so that what we are doing today in a constructive way, we can realize, okay, I'm going to continue to work on myself and develop myself as a soul, as a human being. Next lifetime, I'll come back in, I'll have even more knowledge. And then after lifetime, I'll have even more knowledge so that we then can get to the point where we will be those souls that'll help move humanity forward through whatever we have set forth in our own evolutionary process.
How are we doing on time, Hercules?
We have around a minute,
Ah,
or less than a minute.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed it. We have a vast library called the Unariun Science of Life that goes into all aspects of what we were trying to talk about. You don't have to look up to these other scientists necessarily. You can develop your own inner connection. And this is what Nikola Tesla had. That's why he was so successful, is he had this inner contact. Well, we don't want everybody to think he was the only one who had it. Jesus had it, Buddha had it, other people had it, Einstein had it. They were all cosmic visionaries. We teach how you can obtain your own inner contact and become, in your own way, a cosmic visionary, a positive leader for planet Earth.
so if you want to find out more information about Unarius, you can go to unarius.org, or more about Tesla, you can go to teslaenergy.org, and you'll be able to find lots of more information about Unarius, about how you are an energy being, how you function as an energy being, more about Tesla, what our future will be in utilizing this understanding of the universe, how it functions on teslaenergy.org, or you can give us a call at 800-475-7062. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, Hercules, for inviting us to talk about Tesla and the future of planet Earth. That is, you know what, if I want to end with one thing, it's the recognition that the future of our world is positive. It's positive and progressive. We have all these things happening on our planet right now that are of a negative nature, but these are just bumps in the road towards our much more positive future.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And I recently began a new wave of Atlantean activity, and this is a wonderful presentation that you gave today, and I'm definitely going to link this to there.
Thank you, Hercules. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.